Now we're going to examine the classified income statement. This is what you're going to have to prepare, not the simple income statement for a service company. Now, for a merchandise company, we classify different sections within the income statement. Recall we did a classified balance sheet. Well, now we're talking about a classified income statement. To begin with, we look at, as we did before, revenue. We start off with gross sales. We subtract sales discounts, sales returns and allowances, and we come up with net sales. So we classify the sales that way. Then, as we talked before, we look at the second section, which is the cost of goods sold section. We begin with merchandise inventory, add purchases, deduct purchase returns and allowances, purchase discounts, get net purchases, add transportation in, deduct have goods available for sale, deduct ending inventory, come up with the cost of goods sold, and now we format the cost of goods sold against sales revenue or net sales, and therefore we sold all our items for $103,000 more than it cost us to purchase them. So that is an important classification. We look at the gross profit margin, a percentage, what percentage this is of net sales. Next, we look at the operating expenses. Now, the operating expenses here, unlike the simple income statement we did before, we break into two parts, sales expense and administration. So we want to know how much we spend on sales and marketing. So we categorize these as sales and commission expense, travel, delivery expense, advertising expense, supplies expense, and so on. And again, we can relate the total selling costs to the total sales. Then all other costs, administrative costs, rent, salaries of administrators, insurance expense, depreciation, and so on. So we break the total operating cost of $75,700 into $38,500 selling and $33,500. Oh, it should be $33,200, sorry. Okay. We have the total operating costs, and therefore we have income from operation. We subtract the $75,700 from the $103,000. And we have income from operations of $27,300. Now we also earn some revenue in other areas, and we incur expenses in other areas, and we add and subtract those to come up. So you see, instead of just showing net income of $28,100, we segregate the net income we earn from operations from the net income we earn in other areas. So in this section then we are introduced to a number of new terms. First of all, operating revenues are revenues generated by the major activities of the business. That is, the selling of products or services or both. A new term called the cost of goods sold. This is an expense. It is the cost of the merchandise that I paid for that I sold to my customer. Now we have operating expenses, and operating expenses are all those other expenses other than the cost of goods sold that I incur normally in running my business, rent and selling and marketing. But then we divide those into the operating expenses that are selling and the operating that are administrative. And lastly, we have non-operating revenues. These are other revenues, such as I might have earned interest on some investments, or I might be charging somebody rent, or so on. And I have non-operating expenses, the cost of charging somebody rent. Those kind of things would be summarized here. Now, to summarize some of the relationships we've talked about here, first of all, we look at net sales. Net sales is gross sales minus sales discount and sales returns and allowances. Net purchases are purchases, gross purchases minus purchase discounts and purchase returns and allowances. So the net cost of purchases is net purchases plus any transportation in. Now to determine the cost of goods sold, that's beginning inventory plus the net cost of purchases minus ending inventory. A new term, gross profit or gross margin, is net sales minus the cost of goods sold. Income from operation is gross margin minus selling and admin expenses. And net income is income from operations plus non-operating revenues minus non-operating expenses. So now you must be familiar with all these terms and these relationships. They will all be tested.